Brittany, July 1944. Rain hammered against the armor like 1,000 nails. Mud clung to the tracks, the engine idled low, growling like an animal in pain. Inside the M4A3 Dust Devil, the air was heavy, thick with oil, sweat, and the dull tang of cordite that never quite left the steel. I had my palm on the firing lever, my eye pressed to the gunsight. Through the rain, a shape emerged from the gray, a German vehicle, crawling out of the mist. No turret. Just a flat box of steel with a tall antenna trembling in the wind. The radio hissed. "Hold fire. Wait for confirmation." I didn't move. My finger twitched against the trigger guard. Something was wrong. That machine wasn't built to fight, it was built to command. And every instinct in my body told me that if I obeyed that order, someone, maybe hundreds, would die. Brittany. July 1944. 1 week after the landings. We were part of the 2nd Armored Battalion, 30-ton fragments of the American advance pushing through wet hedgerows and the slow rot of war. On paper, the front looked solid, a wall of armor grinding east toward the Loire. But on the ground, it was nothing like the maps. The roads were narrow, sunken lanes boxed by stone and thorn. Each turn could hide a G*N. Each hedgerow was a fortress. Command called it fluid warfare. We called it fog and mud. The Germans weren't broken. Not yet. They were regrouping, faster, sharper, like steel cooling in water. Their armor slipped between villages at night, ambushing supply convoys by dawn. One moment you heard nothing but insects, the next, an 88mm shell would take the sky apart. Orders came down by radio, slow, brittle, precise. Hold until confirmed. No fire without identification. After Normandy, too many of our own had died under our G*NS. A single misread silhouette could turn a victory into a massacre. Headquarters decided it was better to lose ground than to risk another friendly K*LL. So they gave us the doctrine. Fire discipline saves lives. They printed it on memos, stenciled it on barracks walls. The rule was simple, no one shoots until the chain of command says so. But the front was not a place for rules, it was a place for guesses. The airwaves were jammed half the time. Static devoured every order. Sometimes you'd wait 5 minutes for confirmation, sometimes 50, and sometimes you'd never hear a voice again. In that silence, you learned the rhythm of fear. The seconds between recognition and permission stretched until they snapped. I remember one morning when a Sherman 3 fields over spotted movement in the trees. The G*NR swore it was a German half-track. Command said to hold. They waited. The vehicle rolled past, waving a white cloth. It was ours, engineers. 20 minutes later, the same engineers were dead, caught in a German mortar barrage. Headquarters called it tragedy. We called it waiting too long. By mid-July, the rain came every day. It turned everything to soup, roads, trenches, even thoughts. The air smelled of fuel and wet earth. We moved in columns, engines coughing in low gear, wipers squealing against windshields smeared with mud. That week alone, 3 of our platoons were cut off by German armor that seemed to appear from nowhere. One entire recon unit vanished in fog outside St. Gilles. We found the wrecks 2 days later, burned out and black, hatches open like mouths gasping for air. Through it all, command kept sending messages, maintain position. Await confirmation. No unauthorized fire. They trusted their radios, their maps, their systems. But the systems lagged behind reality. By the time the message traveled up and back, the battlefield had already changed shape. War moved faster than permission. I began to see it like machinery, an engine with too many gears, grinding itself apart. Somewhere between headquarters and the front line, the timing chain slipped. What reached us wasn't control, it was delay. In the quiet moments inside Dust Devil, I listened to the hum of the engine and thought about how every part of a machine depended on timing. Miss a cycle, and the whole thing seized. The army was no different. Orders were supposed to synchronize men, but synchronization only worked if information flowed as fast as danger. It didn't. That's what the manuals never said. They were written in offices, under electric lights, by men who believed war could be managed like logistics. They measured everything in hours and miles. But in the field, everything was measured in seconds and yards. And those seconds, those quiet, hesitant seconds between seeing and being allowed to act, were where men died. We were told obedience was safety. But the longer I stayed in that mud, the more I understood, sometimes the safest thing you could do was break the rule that was supposed to protect you. I didn't know it yet, but that belief, the idea that logic might save where discipline failed, was about to be tested against steel and rain. The Germans were moving fast again, regrouping beyond the hedgerows. Radio chatter spoke of a column advancing under cover of storm clouds. Command said, "Wait for confirmation." And I waited. Until I couldn't. Before France, before the rain and the smell of burned diesel, I fixed engines in Kansas. Winfield, small town, 2-lane Main Street, 1 movie theater, 1 diner. My name was on the window of a narrow garage that smelled of kerosene and hot iron, Lawson and Son Automotive. The "and Son" was my father's idea. He said people trusted a family name. I wasn't brave back then. I wasn't even loud. I liked the sound of an idling motor better than conversation. My hands were always black at the knuckles, the nails lined with grease. The men from the grain mill brought their trucks in every week, broken belts, cracked manifolds, timing issues from dust clogging the valves. I'd strip them down, clean every part, measure clearances with a machinist's ruler I'd bought with my first paycheck. If something jammed, I didn't curse it. I studied it. Machines didn't lie. They broke for a reason. My mother used to stand in the doorway when the shop light burned late and say, "Hank, you'll fix the whole world if you stay up long enough." I'd smile, but I knew better. You can't fix the world. You can only fix what's in front of you. I had a rule written on the back wall in chalk. If the system jams, fix the part, not the man. It meant that most things that looked like failure were just bad alignment. A gear out of place. A valve out of tune. You didn't blame the driver, you recalibrated the engine. That was my life until December 41, when the radio in the shop window said Pearl Harbor. The news crackled through the static, and I remember the wrench slipping from my hand. By January, the shop was shuttered, the floor swept clean. My mother kept my letters later in a cigar box, thin paper folded neat, the handwriting tight and exact. I wrote about engines, about weather, never about fear. The Army sent me to Fort Knox, then to Aberdeen for maintenance training. They liked my hands, said I had mechanical intuition. I thought that was just another word for patience. When the war reached Europe, I followed the tanks because that was where the real machines were. They made me a sergeant by 43. The M4A3 Sherman was a puzzle of steel and hydraulics, 5 men inside a furnace. I learned every bolt, every fuse, every hiss in the hydraulic lines. I could tell from the vibration of the hull whether a tread pin was loose or a road wheel was cracked. That kind of attention made some officers nervous. They liked men who followed checklists, not ones who rewrote them. But I wasn't trying to be clever. I just wanted the machine to run. Because when a tank stops in the wrong place, men die where it stops. They taught us procedure, how to check the breach, how to log a fault, how to radio for clearance before any engagement. And I followed it, always. Until the war showed me that procedure only worked in a world that stayed still. By the time we reached France, I'd seen engines burn out in the mud, transmissions seize mid-climb, radios die in the middle of combat. Each failure started small, just friction in the wrong spot, ignored because the manual said it was within tolerance. War was the same way, friction ignored until the whole thing locked up. Maybe that's why I started doubting orders. Not out of arrogance, but out of maintenance. The Army was a machine too, full of moving parts and stress points. Command believed it could run on perfect timing. I knew better. The system jammed all the time, and when it did, it wasn't the system that died. It was the men. I wasn't a soldier the way they wrote about in newspapers. I didn't dream of flags or parades. I believed in torque, in combustion ratios, in getting the thing to work even when it shouldn't. Maybe that's why I ended up inside Dust Devil, because tanks, like people, responded to patience more than passion. Sometimes I think the Army mistook my silence for discipline. It wasn't. It was calculation. I was always listening, to the engine, to the ground, to the small warnings that came before disaster. And that quiet way of thinking, the one they said made me dependable, would be the same thing that turned me into a man willing to disobey. I didn't plan it that way. It just happened, like a misfire corrected in the dark. The war taught me one last truth about machines and men: if you wait too long for someone else to fix the problem, the whole thing seizes. And when it seizes, you don't just lose the part, you lose everything attached to it. That was who I was before the rain, before Brittany, before the decision that would carry my name in whispers through the battalion. Just a mechanic from Kansas, listening for a sound that didn't belong. By the time we reached Brittany, the fields were more crater than soil. The hedgerows rose taller than a man, thick with nettle and barbed vine. Tanks moved like blind animals through them, slow, grinding, death. The air stank of wet cordite and decaying leaves. Orders came each dawn by radio, a voice from somewhere dry. Hold position. No fire without command authorization. They said it like a prayer, as if repetition could make it truth. But the truth on the ground was different. Out there, you could die in the seconds it took to ask permission. A week earlier, I'd seen it happen. A recon Sherman spotted movement near a crossroads, dark silhouettes through fog. They radioed for clearance, just like the book said. Command hesitated. 5 minutes later, the shapes turned out to be German Panzer grenadiers with a flak half-track. They opened fire first. The recon tank never fired back. When we found it later, the hull was peeled open like fruit, the crew still inside. Headquarters called it an unfortunate delay. We called it what it was, a system failure. Since then, every time I pressed my eye to the sight, I heard the echo of that call, hold your fire. Wait for confirmation. And every time, my hands wanted to move faster than the words coming through the static. We were north of St. Lo when the reports came in, German armor regrouping, fast, coordinated, cutting through our recon lines like wire. The 2nd Armored Battalion was ordered to hold the western sector. I was assigned to Dust Devil, an M4A3 Sherman with a 75mm G*N that rattled like a bad bearing every time it fired. My crew, Miller, Torres, and O'Hara, were good men, tired men. We'd been together since Cherbourg. We could load, aim, and fire without speaking. That morning, visibility was 10 yards at best. Rain came sideways. Our periscope glass fogged despite the heater. Static hissed in our headsets. Somewhere in that haze, an entire German company was moving. When the shape appeared through the mist, boxy hull, antenna high, no turret, I knew what it was. A command vehicle. Not transport, not supply. The kind that carried maps, radios, coordinates, the brain of the formation. Destroy it, and the rest went blind. I reported it in. Possible enemy command vehicle, grid 5-2. Range 200. There was a pause. Then Captain Hughes' voice, flat, tired, somewhere between command and indifference. Report logged. Stand by for confirmation. Sir, it's stationary. We have the angle. You have the order? Negative, sir. But. Then you wait, Sergeant. No heroes today. His voice crackled out, replaced by the drone of the engine. No heroes. I remember that line better than any sermon I ever heard. Through the sight, the vehicle's antenna swayed, picking up faint signals from the rear. A man climbed onto the hull, a German officer with binoculars, scanning west. Behind him, movement, 2 Panzer IVs rolling in slow, careful arcs. Their turrets turned together, like twin eyes adjusting to light. I whispered into the radio, command, confirm target. They're aligning. Silence. Only the rain, the heartbeat of static. Torres, my loader, murmured, we waiting on God now? I didn't answer. I was watching the officer point, to the left, toward the slope where the American field hospital sat under canvas. That's when I understood. They weren't searching. They were sighting. If we waited, they'd level that ridge within minutes. Dozens of wounded. Medics. The unarmed. I looked at the antenna again, thin and trembling, feeding orders into the storm. Procedure said wait. Instinct said fire. My hand hovered over the lever. The crew was silent. Even the engine seemed to hold its breath. Every man inside the tank knew the rule, no sh*T without confirmation. It was branded into us. But I could feel the weight of those seconds stretching, bending, ready to snap. A mechanic's thought flickered through my head, when a machine locks up, you don't ask permission to fix it, you clear the jam before it breaks everything. Outside, thunder rolled, or maybe it was artillery. Hard to tell anymore. Sir? Torres asked quietly. I said nothing. The radio hissed again, no voice, just the sound of rain hitting metal. Somewhere out there, between hedgerows and fog, the war was making up its mind. And so was I. The rain thickened until the world blurred into gray glass. Inside the tank, condensation ran down the steel walls in slow lines. The air was close, oil, sweat, cordite, and the faint sweetness of exhaust leaking through the vents. Through the scope, the German command vehicle wavered in the haze like a mirage. Its antenna flexed in the wind, sending signals into the storm. A figure stood beside it now, same officer, greatcoat soaked to his knees, shouting to someone out of sight. Behind him, I caught movement. 2 Panzer IVs, hulls angled in formation. Their turrets turned, not at us, not at the ridge, but left. I followed the line of that gesture and felt my stomach knot. There, barely visible through the rain, stood the cluster of white tents, the American Field Hospital. No camouflage, no G*NS. Just canvas and light. My voice was steady when I spoke. Command vehicle directing armor on the medical post. Request immediate fire authorization. Static. Then nothing. I waited 5 seconds, 10, 30. Still nothing. The radio operator checked the frequency. Signal's gone, Sarge. We're jammed. Outside, the world turned to water. The hedgerows rippled under the downpour. Every sound came muted, smothered, unreal. Inside, the loader, Torres, shifted uneasily. They're lining up, Hank. Hold steady. You think they see the hospital? They do now. Through the periscope, I saw the lead Panzer's barrel rise a few degrees, slow, deliberate. A commander's hand gesture, one I recognized from training films. It wasn't random. They were preparing indirect fire. In that moment, time folded. The roar of the engine dropped into silence. I could hear the faint ticking of the sight adjustment dial beneath my fingertips, the whisper of rain against the hull, my own breath echoing in the helmet. I imagined the hospital, medics running, stretchers in the mud, the wounded who couldn't move. The rule said to wait. The rule said headquarters knew better. But headquarters wasn't here. It wasn't staring through fog at a German officer who was about to wipe out a field full of men who hadn't even held a rifle. I thought of my garage back home, the smell of gasoline and iron, the neat rows of tools hanging by their outlines on the wall. When something jammed there, I didn't wait for instructions. I found the fault and fixed it. If you waited too long, the heat warped the whole block. The army had its rules. Machines had their logic. I trusted logic more. Sir, Torres whispered again. Orders? The intercom crackled, our commander's voice, distant through static. Command relay down. Hold position until lines clear. Hold position. That phrase again, clean, harmless, fatal. Through the scope, I saw movement on the German side. The officer climbed onto the hull and pointed. The 2 Panzers adjusted their aim left, 1 degree, toward the slope. The antenna trembled, catching one last burst of signal. That was it. The decision moment. The wet turn. Loader, I said quietly, armor-piercing shell. Stand by. Torres hesitated. Without order? With sense. He froze. I could see it in his eyes, the same calculation I was making, the same dread of what disobedience meant. Maybe they're just scouting, he said. Then we'll ruin their day anyway. Outside, the rain struck harder, drumming against the hull like small arms fire. The sound filled the space between thought and action. The 2 Panzers halted. The command vehicle stayed still. The officer raised his hand. My finger settled on the firing lever. Everything around me vanished, the rain, the crew, the fear. Only the crosshairs remained, trembling slightly with the idling engine. I adjusted half a degree down, just enough to catch the lower plate of the command vehicle's hull. Command, the radio operator tried again. This is Dust Devil. We have eyes on. The static swallowed his words. No voice answered. In that silence, I found something strange, clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you realize no one else can decide for you anymore. I looked at Torres. He was pale, waiting. If we wait, I said, they'll K*LL the medics. Maybe us after. We break one rule or we bury 50 men. He swallowed hard, nodded once. Outside, the officer dropped his hand. The Panzer barrels flashed, brief lightning in the fog. That was the moment the rulebook died. When the first German shell hit the ridge, the sound wasn't a boom. It was a pressure, like the sky exhaling all at once. The blast rolled through the fields, shaking the mud loose from our tracks. A second sh*T followed, farther left, closer to the hospital. The flashes came through the rain, brief, white, surgical. Inside Dust Devil, the intercom buzzed with fragments. All units hold position, hold fire until. The rest drowned in static. Torres's hands hovered over the shells. He looked at me. They've started shooting, Hank. I see it. We got no clearance. I see that too. Through the periscope, the command vehicle was still there, barely visible through the gray curtain. Its antenna glowed faintly from lightning. The officer was gone, probably inside now, giving coordinates. I could almost hear it, the calm arithmetic of destruction, a man on a radio calling numbers that would erase the wounded without ever seeing them. The hospital's tents rippled. I saw a medic running, then another flash. The hillside erupted in fire. Something in me broke loose. I picked up the radio handset. My voice came out steady. Dust Devil to command, enemy armor engaging non-combatant zone. We're returning fire. Static. Then a voice snapped back, sharp and cold. Negative. Hold your position. Repeat, do not. I let go of the button. The hiss lingered for a second, then vanished. No heroes today, the captain had said. Fine. No heroes. Just mechanics. Loader, I said. Armor-piercing shell. Target, command vehicle. Torres didn't move. His jaw tightened. Hank, you sure? No. He waited. But it feels right, I said quietly. And that's close enough. He slid the shell from the rack. 43 pounds of brass and steel. The loader's ritual, one motion to wipe the casing, one to check the fuse, one to seat it clean. The round clanged into the breech. I closed it, felt the heavy lock click into place. The turret hummed as I adjusted elevation. Through the sight, I could see the rain bouncing off the German hull, sparks of water turning to silver. The antenna quivered. Range? 200 meters, maybe a hair less, Torres said. Good. One breath. The crew was silent. Even the engine seemed to stop. I thought about Kansas, about the garage and the smell of iron, the sound of engines turning under my hands. About the rule scrawled on the wall, if the system jams, fix the part, not the man. The system was jammed. The part was me. I exhaled, slow. The crosshairs steadied. My thumb brushed the safety catch. In that second before the sh*T, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the war, certainty. Not about survival, not about orders, just about motion. The kind that comes when every part of a machine finally aligns. Firing. The lever dropped. The tank shuddered, the recoil slamming into my shoulder like a hammer. The smell of gunpowder filled the cabin, hot and metallic. Outside, the rain seemed to stop for a heartbeat as the shell cut through it. Then, impact. A flash lit the horizon white. The German command vehicle erupted in a column of fire. The antenna snapped backward like a wire under tension, and for a moment, the entire world went silent except for the echo rolling through the fields. Torres whispered, hit confirmed. I blinked, staring through the smoke. The officer's shadow was gone. The two Panzers hesitated, turning in opposite directions. Their turrets no longer moved in unison. Confusion, exactly what we needed. I reloaded. Second shell. Left Panzer. Orders, the radio operator asked, voice trembling. New order, I said. Stay alive. The next sh*T went wide, hit a tree, showering the enemy with debris. They fired back, blind through smoke. One shell landed short, carving a crater just ahead of us. Dirt rained onto the hull like hail. Adjust 5 degrees right, I muttered. They're blind. We keep them blind. Another shell, fire, recoil, thunder. The left Panzer's tracks split under the blast, the tank listing sideways into the ditch. Its G*N barrel sagged, motionless. We'd broken the rule, the one that chained men to hesitation. And the moment we did, the battle shifted. The field was alive now, rifle fire cracking from the tree-line, our infantry opening up, using the confusion to advance. The Germans, leaderless, scrambled for cover. I sat back, sweat rolling down my temples, my heartbeat loud in my ears. Reload, I said softly. Let's finish it. And somewhere in the static, command's voice returned, distant, too late. All units, engage at will. The blast rolled through my chest like thunder trapped in a box. Through the scope, I watched the shell fly, a streak of white through rain, and then the world folded in on itself. The German command vehicle vanished in a sheet of fire. For an instant, the explosion didn't even make sound. It just expanded, a sphere of orange and black, rain sizzling as it hit the heat. The antenna sheared off first, snapping into the mud like a broken limb. Then came the secondary blast, fuel or radio batteries, a dull thud that rippled outward and tore the mist apart. Pieces of armor clanged against the wet ground. A man ran from the wreck, coat ablaze, stumbled, and didn't get up. The two Panzers froze. Their turrets stopped mid-turn, barrels searching the fog for an order that would never come. Without that command link, they were blind, metal without mind. "Target neutralized," I said. My voice sounded wrong, distant, as if someone else were speaking. Torres exhaled, half laugh, half tremor. "Jesus, Hank, you hit her dead." "Not Jesus," I said. "Just aim." Outside, the rain shifted color, gray mixed with black smoke. It smelled of burning fuel, sharp and sweet. The wreck burned hot enough that the droplets turned to steam before they touched it. One of the Panzers started backing up, treads slipping in the mud. The other turned right, trying to flank what it couldn't see. I reloaded, the motion automatic now, shell, breach, lock, fire. The next round caught the flanking tank's side armor and tore it open like tin. Flames crawled through its engine deck. The loader shouted, "She's cooking." "Let her," I said. The second Panzer hesitated, engine revving high. Then it turned away entirely, disappearing into the rain. They weren't retreating with discipline, they were running. From the tree line behind us, I heard shouts, our infantry, finally moving. Rifles cracked, then the hammering stutter of Brownings. The forest erupted with small arms fire, echoing off the hedges. For 2 minutes, maybe less, chaos reigned. Then silence returned, thick, wet, final. I kept my eye on the scope, searching for movement. Nothing. Only the burning wrecks, the slow sway of smoke, and the hiss of rain against steel. "Cease fire," I said. Inside the tank, no one spoke. The only sound was the engine ticking as it cooled. The smell was unbearable, sweat, powder, scorched rubber. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the recoil still echoing in my bones. Outside, medics began to move down the slope. I could see their silhouettes through the haze, carrying stretchers, some running, some kneeling beside the wounded who hadn't made it to cover before the first shells fell. We'd saved most of them. Not all. Never all. Torres leaned back against the shell rack, wiping his face. "Think they'll call that insubordination or initiative? Depends who's writing the report." He smiled weakly. "If it's the captain? Then it's disobedience with good aim." I pulled off my gloves and rested my hands on the cold metal of the turret ring. Every part of the tank vibrated faintly, like a heart slowing down. The smell of ozone hung in the air, the scent that follows a storm or a sh*T that changes something you can't take back. Outside, American riflemen advanced past the burning hulks. One stopped to look at the shattered command vehicle, then waved toward us, a quick signal, 2 fingers, a nod, acknowledgement without words. We'd done it. But the triumph didn't land. It just hovered there, fragile, like the last echo of the G*N. I sat back in the seat, watching smoke drift across the scope. That one sh*T had stopped an attack, maybe saved 100 men. But it had also burned the rulebook that kept order in a war built on orders. And when the radio came alive again, the voice of command, thin with static, all I said was, "Dust Devil reporting. Target neutralized. Holding position." The reply crackled back after a pause. "Copy that. Good work, Sergeant. Stand by for review." Review. The word hung heavy. It meant questions, reports, judgment. But none of that mattered yet. Not in that moment, sitting in a steel box that smelled of fire and rain, watching the wreck of an enemy command post collapse into itself. For the first time in weeks, the front was quiet. No shells, no orders. Just the soft hiss of falling rain over burning metal, the sound of something ending, and something else beginning. I didn't feel pride. Just relief, raw and simple. Relief that, for once, breaking the rule had kept the machine running. 3 hours after the last shell, the rain finally stopped. What it left behind was worse, steam rising from the mud, the stench of burned rubber and flesh, the quiet drip of water from warped armor. We stayed buttoned up until sunset, waiting for counterfire that never came. When the hatch finally opened, the air hit like a slap, cold, damp, carrying the metallic tang of victory that didn't feel like one. Our captain arrived before dark. 2 jeeps, 4 officers, clean boots. You could tell they hadn't been near the front all day. They walked straight past the corpsmen working the slope, straight past the wrecked Panzers, and stopped in front of Dust Devil. "Sergeant Lawson," one said, his collar bars shining like wet glass. "You fired without authorization." "Yes, sir." He looked at the smoking German vehicle, then back at me. "You shouldn't have fired." I didn't answer. He held my stare for a moment, then nodded once toward the burning wreck. "But good sh*T. The others took notes, clipped, quiet, mechanical. One of them pulled a camera from a waterproof bag and snapped photographs of the field, the command vehicle, the 2 disabled Panzers, the line of wounded moving toward the aid post. When the engineers searched the debris, they found what I'd suspected even before pulling the trigger: radio equipment, maps, and coded coordinate sheets. The target grid matched the hospital ridge exactly. They'd been seconds away from leveling it. A lieutenant handed me a soggy clipboard. "Write your statement, Sergeant. Start with why you ignored Standing Order 06. I wrote it the same way I'd repaired an engine, carefully, line by line. Radio failure. Enemy in position to strike medical zone. No command relay. Decision made on field logic." He read it twice, then said nothing. Back at the forward depot, word spread fast. Tank crews talked, infantry whispered, medics pointed toward the ridge and said one word: Sherman. In a war where orders meant everything, a man who disobeyed and lived was dangerous. But a man who disobeyed and saved lives, that confused them. That night, the battalion commander summoned me. His tent was neat, the air heavy with pipe smoke. He didn't shout. He didn't even look angry. He just turned a page on his desk and said, "You understand, Sergeant, that I can't commend this action officially. Not when it violated procedure." "Yes, sir. But unofficially," he paused, tapping the ash from his pipe. "Unofficially, that was the cleanest piece of G***nary I've seen this month." He signed the report. The final line read: "Decisive action under disrupted communications. No reprimand. No medal. No trial. Just a file number and silence." When I returned to the tank park, the crew was sitting on the hull, sharing rations in the dark. Torres handed me a tin of coffee, half rainwater by now. "They hang you?" he asked. "Not today." He grinned. "Then we live with it." We did. But something in me stayed bent from that day forward, like a barrel that's seen too much heat. After that, command radio discipline relaxed, just slightly. They called it field discretion. Crews were told to act on visual confirmation when communications failed. Nobody said my name, but I heard the shift in tone. Orders came shorter, less certain, more human. The system had learned, reluctantly, that war didn't wait for permission. 2 nights later, an officer from headquarters brought a folded letter marked for record. Inside was one line typed in black ink. Action noted. No further inquiry. No decoration, no signature, no witnesses. Just bureaucracy quietly stepping aside. That was the real reward: anonymity. Because in the end, nobody wanted to write a rule admitting that sometimes the rule had to be broken. The next morning, we rolled out again. The rain returned before noon, washing the field clean of smoke but not of memory. As the engine settled into its hum, I ran a hand over the G***N breech, still warm, still stained from the last shell. Torres said, "Feels like we cheated death." "No," I told him. "We just argued with it long enough to win." When the fog lifted, the burned German command car was still visible behind us, black against the green. It looked small now, like a problem already solved. But I knew better. Every man in that column had followed his orders exactly. And that was why they lost. After the war, I went home. Not to medals or parades, just to Kansas. The garage still stood where I'd left it, concrete floor cracked from frost, oil stains like old shadows on the walls. My mother had kept everything. The wrench set, the radio, the bench lamp with the cracked shade. She'd even hung a small flag in the window, faded pink where the red had run. I opened the place again that spring. The sign still read Lawson and Son, though my father was long gone. The first weeks were quiet: tractors, grain trucks, the usual. I worked in silence, the way I always had, sleeves rolled, tools arranged by size, movements measured and precise. At night, when the town slept, I'd sit in the back room with a cup of black coffee and the wooden box they'd mailed me from Europe. Inside were the only things I kept from the war: a Bronze Star, a faded photo of the crew, and a burned scrap of a German map, the one they'd found in the command vehicle's wreckage. The coordinates were still visible. I never showed it to anyone. I didn't talk about the war. Not to neighbors, not to reporters, not even to the men who came back wearing ribbons. They told stories loud enough for all of us. I kept mine under lock and key. People in town remembered me as the man who could fix anything. Broken plow, stuck starter, jammed carburetor, if it could be repaired, I'd find a way. Farmers said I worked quiet, like I was listening to the machines. Maybe I was. Sometimes, when the shop was empty and the afternoon light hit the wall just right, I'd hear the echo of rain on armor. I'd feel the vibration of the turret ring through my palms, the recoil like a heartbeat that never stopped. It wasn't guilt, exactly. More like a sound that refused to fade. Once, a local paper sent a young man to interview returning heroes. He asked if I'd seen combat. I told him I'd seen mud. He asked if I'd ever disobeyed an order. I said machines don't care about orders, only alignment. He left with half a quote and a puzzled look. The story never ran. Years later, when my boy was old enough to reach the workbench, he started asking questions. Kids do that. He'd pick up a wrench and mimic me, brows furrowed, pretending to loosen invisible bolts. One evening he found the wooden box. I caught him tracing the map scrap with his finger. "Dad," he said, "is it true you fired when you weren't supposed to?" I looked at him for a long time. He was young, too young to understand that right and wrong don't always arrive in time for you to choose between them. So I told him the only truth that ever made sense to me. Sometimes, I said, not firing is worse than firing when you shouldn't. He nodded like he understood, though I knew he didn't. How could he? After he went to bed, I sat in the dark for a while, listening to the wind rattle the shop door. Out in the fields, the night insects hummed in their endless machinery, steady and precise. The same rhythm the engine made when it idled right. The years passed quietly. The world moved on to new wars, new machines. The old ones rusted away, Shermans turned to museum pieces, their paint polished by schoolchildren's hands. No one remembered the mud, the smell of burnt cordite, the rain inside a steel box. But sometimes veterans stopped by, men older than me, their eyes pale and watchful. They'd shake my hand too long, not saying much. We didn't need to. There's a language in silence that never fades. In 1963, the town put my name on a bronze plaque beside the post office, a list of the ones who served. They spelled it right, at least. I never attended the ceremony. I was under a truck that day, changing a clutch. Now, years later, when I close the shop at dusk and the tools hang in order again, I still glance at the wall where my old rule once was, the one I'd scrawled in chalk before I left. If the system jams, fix the part, not the man. The words are faint, almost gone. But I can still see them when the light catches. Maybe that's all the legacy anyone gets, a rule that kept a few things running longer than they should have. And when people ask what I did in the war, I tell them the same thing every time. I fixed what I could. The rest fixed me. He wasn't supposed to fire. But that one sh*T tore through a command vehicle, shattered a formation, and saved hundreds of lives hiding beneath canvas and hope. They called it luck, judgment, instinct, words people use when they can't explain logic under fire. I called it repair. The manuals never mentioned what to do when the system itself becomes the problem. They only taught us how to wait. But war doesn't wait, and neither did I. In the end, it wasn't bravery or defiance, it was alignment. One man, one machine, one decision that arrived faster than permission could travel. And as the years thinned and memory rusted, one truth stayed clean as polished steel. Sometimes, one sh*T can change the course of everything.